Welcome to Bilt, your place for DIY home improvements. I'm Paul. I finally get to pour the countertops for our barbecue and fireplace. This has been a long journey. Time to get it done. When I first began this project, the plan was to do concrete countertops. But then I started thinking, are they really the best, and are they a cost-effective option for us to do? Then I thought about using large porcelain tiles, but we don't want to have any grout lines, which means I probably would have had to pay somebody to come in here and install one large porcelain slab. Then I went down the Venetian plaster trail, and it looks good and it's gaining popularity, but it's probably too big of a job for me to do for the first time. So we ended up back at concrete and me doing it myself. Tools and items needed: concrete countertop mix, concrete die, a cement mixer, a 3/4 inch melamine panel, some plastic trim, a tape measure, a screw gun drill driver, a table or miter saw, a hammer, a brad nailer, wood glue, a magnesium trowel, concrete finishing trowels, a hand sander, diamond sanding pads, some buckets, some building paper, gloves, and your personal safety gear. One of the things that started to discourage me about using cement was the cost started to add up. There are a few different manufacturers of concrete countertop mix, but then finding a local place to purchase a few bags was another challenge. And with any online option, the shipping costs add another 30 to 50% to the total price. Then you need to purchase the wood to make your forms or buy some pre-made plastic ones. You need to get some dye, you need the sealant, and even diamond sanding pads. All of this starts to add up. I was able to purchase this bag at a local box store, so I did save on shipping. Actually, I saw this same bag online for 5 times more than what I paid for it. On the Bruce scale, technical ability, I rate between a novice and expert. You'll need basic carpentry and concrete finishing skills. Physical ability, I rate as hard. Mixing and moving concrete can get tiring, so get yourself a helper. For the countertops, we just want a simple square edge with slightly rounded corners, so to build a mold out of wood is pretty easy for me to do. I do own a table saw, so I'm able to keep my cuts straight and square. If you don't have all the tools, there are some plastic molds available. They come in different edge profiles, they look easy to use, and they'll snap off once the concrete cures. Either way, if done correctly, you should end up with a nice smooth edge. I've already attached some of the forms on the other side of the barbecue and around the fireplace. The countertops will have about a 2-inch overhang, except the front of the fireplace will be around 3 inches. The barbecue counter will have a 2-inch side profile, and the seating area around the fireplace will have a 3-inch side profile. These forms were built out of 2x2s I kept from the old pergola and a 2-foot by 8-foot melamine panel that I cut into strips. I ran a little short on the melamine, so I had to use some 3/4 inch pine boards as well. I'm going to finish up the forms for this section here. Then I need to cut this plastic into strips, and it'll be used along the inside wall. And that will make a little lip for me to use when I screed and level the concrete. Last thing will be to pull out the barbecue and make the forms that go along that inside edge. Before attaching the 2x2s, I ran them through the table saw to give me a true 90-degree corner. The 2x2s need to be attached 2 3/4 inches below the square support that goes around the perimeter of the barbecue. That will give me the 2-inch side profile for the countertops. Starting with the piece closest to the barbecue, I used clamps, a tape measure, and a level to get the 2x2s in the exact position. Once I was happy with it, I drilled pilot holes to keep the wood from splitting and made sure the screws went into the metal studs. Then I attached the 2x2 along the side and the 2 pieces around the front. The bottom of the form is next. These strips are 2 3/4 inches wide. I'll work on squaring up the corners first. Then I need to cut and fit the pieces that go around the post. Space is tight, so I'm going to be using a piece of trim instead of the 2x2. This will fit behind the post and be glued and brad nailed to the second piece. Then I can screw the other end into a stud. I still need to cut these, so I'll mark and cut the front and the back, and then I'll cut the side piece. I'll use wood glue and clamps to hold the two pieces together, then flip it on its side so I can put in some brad nails. These are the most important corners to get square because this is what you'll be seeing when it's all done. I'll do the same process: glue, clamp, and nail. The countertop will have a straight edge lining up with the post, which means it will overhang a little less in this area. I was going to have the post notch into the countertop about an inch, but decided this will look cleaner. It was tricky getting the form built around the other side of the post, but I was able to get it done. Last thing I need to do on these forms is screw the bottom piece of the form into the 2x2. I'm adding caulking to the seams to make the forms watertight and to have a rounded edge. To help make consistent corners, I'm going to grind off the corner of this old putty knife using a 3/4 inch washer as a guide. Then I can run the putty knife along the corners and end up with a nice edge. I need to cut a fairly large opening in the caulking too. I'm using black so it stands out much better against the white forms. Now that the caulking is dried, I can trim away any excess to keep the concrete sides void free, with a quick sanding to smooth out any rough spots. I still need to build the forms for the barbecue cutout. These will screw directly to the metal studs on the two sides and back. I need to measure and cut them to the correct length, then I can attach them at the proper height. I'll use my 4-foot level as a guide, resting it across the front edge and the back plastic edge. I want it to be slightly higher along the back edge so any water drains away from the barbecue. That looks about right. Just checking that they are level with each other. Now I can measure and cut the back piece and attach it. Last little piece is for the front edge of the barbecue that needs a notch in the countertop. After reading some of the reviews on this, I almost switched to the 5000 psi high strength cement mix. This is one of the more expensive bags on the shelf in the store, and is it really any different, or does it just come in a fancy blue bag? However, I did build my test countertop out of this, so I thought I should stick with it. Most of the complaints online were about when you use the recommended amount of water, it still comes out very thick and is challenging to work with. But to help me mix this up, I purchased this new cement mixer for this project. I'm sure it's going to speed up the mixing process for me. Also, my old drill started smoking on me when I was building the test countertop. So while this is doing its job mixing, it'll free me up with the ability to work the cement mix into the mold.
Let's start mixing!
This is a brand new 4.5 cubic foot cement mixer. I read that it can hold around 200 pounds, so I should be able to mix 2 of the 80-pound bags of countertop mix at a time. Whatever you use to mix your countertop mix, make sure it is clean. You don't want any dirt or old cement getting into the mix. I'm just about ready to pour the countertops. Finally got the forms and the trim done. Let me take on a closer look on that. I cut the plastic into 1.5 inch strips and attached them to all the walls that will be on the inside of the countertops. This will give me an edge I can use as a guide when I screed the cement mix. I also added some pieces around the pergola post. I was going to pour the cement between the post and the wall, but it's such a small space that probably wouldn't end up looking very good. So I decided just to square off the form, and I'll fill that space in with some weather stripping after I do the stucco. I pre-drilled some mounting holes into the plastic first, then used construction glue and nailed the pieces into place, making sure they're level with the rest of the forms. I'm trying to keep all the inside edges slightly higher so any water will drain away from the structure. I also added 2 strips of aluminum bar to the front of the fireplace. This created a clean edge for the front of the fireplace as well as an edge that I can use for screeding. The next thing that I need to do is cut the wire mesh that will reinforce the concrete inside the countertops. I did build myself some shade, so that'll keep the sun off the countertops as they're drying. I do want to lay out this paper so it'll protect the pavers from any of the concrete spilling over. And I just want to double check to make sure that I have all the tools I need to get this done. I'm using a sawzall with a fine-tooth blade to cut the wire mesh. I used some plastic zip ties to hold the mesh up off the cement board as well as tying the pieces together. You want the wire mesh to be embedded into the cement, not just sitting on the bottom, so I have to remember to pull this up when I pour the cement. I think I'm ready. Construction paper is covering the pavers, the mixer's in position, buckets are ready with water. I sprayed the wood forms with furniture wax to prevent the cement from sticking to them, and I have all the tools I'll be needing. Hold on everybody, here we go. Approximately 1 gallon of water is required for each bag, and you want to add the color mix to the water first and blend it well. Be careful with this stuff, it will stain anything it touches. Since this is my first time using the new mixer and I don't know how well it will work, I'm going to do just 1 bag of countertop mix. I'll start with some water, then add half a bag. Mix it a little, and then add the rest of the water and empty the bag. If it goes well, I'll do 2 bags on the next batch. Now I'll pour some of it into the 5-gallon bucket and then pour it into the mold. I'm going to start mixing the next batch, then I'll work the first batch into the forms. After screeding the concrete and getting it level, let it set up a bit before starting the finishing process. This is where experience will help with the timing. I got a little anxious and I started too soon, thinking it will harden too quickly and I won't be able to smooth it out. Start with a magnesium float. It will smooth the surface of the fresh concrete and open the pores for proper evaporation. Use very light pressure, lifting the leading edge slightly. Try to sweep the float in large arcs across the surface of the concrete, which was a little tough for me to do in this small area. This will push the larger aggregate lower into the concrete and allow some of the finer aggregate and sand to move to the top, creating a smooth surface. Remember to keep tapping the form with a hammer to remove any air pockets. Let the cement set up a little bit longer, then use the magnesium float again, adding a little bit more pressure. Wash off the trowel in a bucket often to remove any buildup of material. My plan is to round the top edges by sanding them after I remove the forms, so I won't be using an edge trowel on the countertops. You want to do at least 2 passes with the magnesium float before moving on to a steel trowel. This is my 3rd pass. It's starting to set up well. It should be ready for the steel trowel after this pass, but it's starting to get dark. Well, I did it again. I'm trying to finish concrete in the dark. At least I do have a few lights this time. I was able to get the countertop around the barbecue poured, but I decided to wait till tomorrow morning to do the one that goes around the fireplace. Good morning. Here is the finished countertop. After using the magnesium float, I did 2 passes with this steel trowel last night. Then I decided to mix up a bottle of cement dye and spray it onto the top surface. I'm hoping this will stain the concrete darker, but I have no idea if this will work or if it was a mistake. The test countertop I made came out gray, and we want this one to look closer to black. It has a very even flat black color to it, but it appears to be sitting on the surface. I also have no idea how I end up spraying the fence black. I'm going to wash this off with the pressure washer, then start mixing the concrete for the countertop around the fireplace. I'll start off with 2 bags of mix for the first batch. I used 4 bags yesterday, and the slower one should take me around 6 bags. To make things a bit easier and to be more efficient, I put 2 bags of mix in a wheelbarrow. Then I cut the top of the bag with a utility knife and lifted up on the center of the bag, splitting it into 2 smaller bags. Now I can easily add a half a bag of mix at a time. Remember to wear your dust mask. Remember when I said this will stain everything? Fortunately, most of it landed on the paper, and I was able to hose down the pavers before it soaked in. This batch came out very thick. I guess I spilt more water than I thought. I'm gonna add a little bit more water and mix it some more. Well, I'm a mess, and I sure made a mess, but I did get the concrete poured around the fireplace. This mix is definitely different. When you mix it with the proper amount of water, it is dry. The first batch that you saw me dump barely came out of the mixer, but I did spill a bit of water on that one. I ended up using the recommended amount of water, then adding just a bit more to get the desired consistency. I found working with your hands and really pushing it into the corners work the best. Hopefully I'll get good results from that. I was able to level it somewhat with the screed, but found it challenging to get it level around the post. So I ended up using my hands, trowels, the 1x4, and whatever else I could to work the mix and get it level. At this stage, you still want a slightly textured surface. That way the concrete can continue to evaporate properly. Using a wooden float will help do this. This is about the time the camera battery died. The cement started to set up and some panic started to set in. I probably should have used my wooden float, but I ended up grabbing that magnesium float to finish leveling and flatten out the surface. Now I just need to let it set up a bit, and then I can start smoothing it out and hopefully make it look good. Oh, and I do need to tap the edges every 15 or 20 minutes. I'm probably like most DIYers and have limited experience when it comes to finishing concrete, which is why I made a small test countertop before attempting this. I highly recommend doing the same because now I can go into the finishing phase with a little more confidence of what needs to be done and when. Use a magnesium float about 30 to 60 minutes after the concrete is placed, when it starts to have a dull, dry look. Check the firmness of the concrete with a finger. If you can only push it in about 1/4 of an inch, then it's ready for the magnesium float. Using this float will help you get a smooth, flat surface, but still allow water to rise to the top and evaporate. You will notice a creamier concrete as it pulls more bleed water to the surface. There's a low spot in the cement. I found placing the float flat and moving it back and forth helped to level this area. I'll let it set up a bit and then run the float over it again at an angle. Be sure to clean the cement residue off the float and dry it before using it again. A towel or pant leg works great for this. You can create a very smooth finish by passing over the slab 2 or 3 times, waiting for the concrete to dry slightly between passes, lifting the leading edge a little and adding more pressure each time. To achieve a very smooth or burnished finish, use a steel trowel. For me, this stage is one of the trickier steps in finishing concrete. In normal conditions, your concrete should be ready for a steel trowel between 2 and 4 hours. There should never be any soft cream or bleed water present when steel troweling. If you steel trowel the concrete too early, you could potentially damage the surface by trapping moisture or air under it. This causes blisters and scaling eventually. You can also end up with a rough surface due to latence, which is a soft, dusty layer on top of the concrete when it dries. This is what happened to me when I did my test countertop. I probably started with the steel trowel a little too early with this one as well. It's challenging when one part of the countertop is ready and the other part isn't. Think of a steel trowel as compacting and sealing the cement, trapping any water and air inside, while a magnesium float will smooth and move, allowing the surface to still breathe. For a really smooth finish, repeat the troweling step 2 or 3 times, letting the concrete harden a bit before each pass. At first, hold the trowel almost flat, elevating the leading edge just enough to avoid gouging the surface. On each successive pass, lift the leading edge of the trowel a little more. I took a grinder to my steel trowel and rounded the corners on one side to help me avoid gouging or scarring the surface. After 3 passes with the steel trowel, I sprayed the top surface with some stain. I'm still not sure what the end results will be, but I thought I should be consistent with the countertops around the barbecue. Now we wait for them to cure, keeping them moist for the next 48 hours. They do recommend covering them in plastic without the plastic touching the surface. I'm not sure if that will be possible, so I'm going to keep them moist and keep the sun off of them. It's been about a day and I'm concerned about the stain I sprayed on the top of the surface. It has dried and turned into a powder that appears to be just sitting on the surface, and it wipes off if you touch it. I've been watering the surface down, but now I'll go over it lightly with a scouring pad and see if I can remove some of the dust. I'm gonna go grab an old towel to wipe this down with. I'm kinda liking the results. Well, guess it's time to take the forms off and find out if I'm going to be smiling or frowning. Let's do this. Well, the edges came out okay for the most part. There are a few small voids that will need to be patched, but unfortunately the worst part is at the center right in front of the fireplace that I will need to fix. It's been a couple of days. I've washed the countertops with water a few more times and also used a scouring pad to help blend and remove some of the chalky top layer of stain. That stain was really messy, but I can now touch the countertop without my hands turning black. I'm not sure if spraying the stain on after screening it was a good idea or not, but I really like the results. It almost looks like a dark slate rock. And I'm also very pleased with the top surface. It came out very smooth with just a few rough spots, but that adds character, right? To fix some of these imperfections, I'll mix up some countertop cement with the stain that I have left over in the sprayer. Then I can take a piece of wood for these larger voids and use this as a form and then press the cement into those areas. They recommend using grout for small air pocket holes, but I'll try using the cement as well. If that doesn't work, then I'll get the grout. While that is curing, I'll take some diamond sanding pads and I'll start smoothing and rounding the top edge. I mixed up a small batch of the countertop mix with some stain. I'll use this to fill in the larger voids. This is probably going to be too thick for the small holes, so I'll just fill in what I can and then use some grout after the cement cures. I want to get the form off before it dries and I can still shape the bottom corner. I'll go over it lightly with the magnesium float first and see how that does. It's getting close. I'll let it sit up some more, then go over it again. I used an orbital sander to round off the top edge of the concrete. This has a 100 grit diamond pad on it. I discovered that when you're sanding an edge that you need to make sure that you keep it spinning by applying a light pressure, or you'll wear a groove into the pad fairly quickly. Well, the cement mix did fill in the larger voids, but I will need to apply some grout to fill in the small holes and make the sides look better. I picked up a box of non-sanded polyblend grout. There is a sanded grout for larger gaps. What is nice about this is that it's available in lots of colors, so I was able to match it to the same charcoal stain I mixed with the cement. The directions say to mix it with the proper amount of water, let it sit for 5 minutes, then mix it again. I'll be using a tile float to apply the grout to the sides of the countertops, wiping it on, working it into the small holes, and then letting it set up for 15 minutes. I used a wet sponge to get the extra grout off the corner. Then I wiped down the sides, blending it in with the concrete. Doing this also added some color back into the rounded top corner that I sanded. Generally, we are happy with the color of the countertops, but there are a few sections I want to work on. This side of the fireplace looks great, but the other side is a little bland and both sides of the barbecue need some attention. I'll start with an 800 grit diamond pad with some water to remove some of the scratches and marks. While doing this, I also sanded the sides of the countertops to smooth and blend the grout. After sanding, I gave it a good wash and wiped it all down. Now I'm going to reapply some of the stain by dripping it onto the countertops. I'm trying to create a more natural stone look. I'm done with the sanding and staining and the countertops are finally ready to be sealed. I purchased this concrete cure and seal and then applied it to my test piece. I'm glad I did because it was a shiny finish and we were wanting a flat finish. There are a lot of choices for concrete sealer. After doing some more research, I purchased this 511 impregnator sealer. This was recommended for countertops. You can use it outdoors and it is safe for food. You apply it with a paint roller, brush, or rag, let it dry to 3 to 5 minutes, then wipe it off. This was simple and easy to do.
The countertops are finished. It's been a journey to get here, but I'm very happy with the results. Hit the like button for me and be sure to subscribe to Bilt. The last thing I need to do is apply the stucco, then this fireplace project is done. And then I get to start a new one.